I'm Rob Elliott, and today I'm just going to talk about sort of a different couple strategies that we're working on for updating the way green infrastructure is treated in the urban environment. Because we're kind of hearing a lot about different landscapes, I just wanted to contextualize this in the urban setting. And as the world becomes more urban, sort of getting these centers to run more efficiently is of a paramount importance. And green infrastructure is sort of specifically driven by the management of water and sort of how cities, this landscape of impermeable surfaces and concrete changes the hydrologic cycle. In places like New York and many older cities where there's single sewer systems, the response to stormwater is the release of sewage or other pollutants directly into the natural water bodies. On the left is a combined sewer overflow in the Gowanus, and in the right you can see runoff from New York and tributaries upstate into the Hudson River. So the little cartoon on the top shows this change in hydrologic response. So pre-development, you had much more infiltration, much more of the rainwater would be transported underground. With the hardscape, most of that water that once infiltrated becomes runoff. And additionally, the lack of vegetation results in much less water being returned to the atmosphere by evapotranspiration, by plants. And on the bottom is a list of sort of all the different green infrastructure typologies categorized. And I'm not going to go through each of them individually, but the idea is that to significantly change the behavior of a landscape, and especially an existing urban landscape, you need a whole array of strategies, and they need to be able to be suited to different niches in the urban environment. So there are ways of dealing with stormwater traditionally, and I'm showing on the left a traditional wastewater treatment plant, and they're centralized, single purpose, and because they're more mechanical, they have consistent performance. This new strategy of green infrastructure, the idea is that it's distributed, it's commonplace, and in addition to helping with the stormwater management, they provide services that ecosystems provide, so cultural, health, livability type services. And additionally, as they are ecosystems, the performance changes throughout the year with different storms. So those functional differences result in some challenges in like a holistic integration of this into the built environment. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on 3 different projects I've been working on and continue to work on related to sort of integrating it more appropriately. The first will be on optimizing existing vegetation in cities for stormwater management. The second will be on a new type of green infrastructure been developing, and the third will be on a framework to evaluate green infrastructure in a holistic manner. So right now, street trees in New York occupy 6% of the land cover, so they're by far the most commonplace distributed type of vegetation. And just quickly looking at the hydrology, sort of the canopies are able to capture water, channel it down to the base, and then you often have this small surface of soil which is incapable of conveying that water underground. So my work focuses on that soil surface, and specifically what ways we can treat that space to improve its ability to absorb stormwater. I took 100 measurements last summer and then was able to develop an empirical model that relates those physical features to their ability to absorb stormwater. The biggest difference we found was the difference between, or the presence of a guard. If you had a tree guard, we saw much better infiltration performance, presumably because there wasn't footfall on it, which compacts the soil and creates this hard layer of soil. So sort of following that line of thinking, we installed tree guards, and there's a few identical tree pits by Booker T. Washington, just a couple streets down. And this is only 1 year, and we're continuing to track them. But you can see the infiltration rate in all of the pits where we installed guards were improved really drastically. So this represents a very low-hanging fruit for municipalities to help use what's already here. The next project I'm going to talk about is trying to quantify and optimize the use of vines as a new type of green infrastructure. Vines are interesting because they kind of take whatever form you give them. The biologically active part, the leaves, you can give it a structure and it'll fill it generally. So in that sense, you can leverage them for their other ecosystem services to make more beautiful places, more intimate connections with nature to residents. Here's one system I've developed, and it basically captures water, holds it in a reservoir, and then through capillary action, the vines, or it feeds the soil and then is released during daytime. And a type of system like this, compared to a green roof, which is shown here, that has uniform loading, which results in the greatest load midspan. If you're able to concentrate the heavy part over areas with greater structural capacity, so columns, you can retrofit existing stock much easier. And also, you allow people to occupy the space. Green roofs are too sensitive to be walked on. There's delicate sedum plant. So, going after that, I've grown 18 different vine species on a roof and measured their ability to both capture water through just on their leaf surface to absorb it, and their ability to return water by evapotranspiration. Then I use those numbers to sort of model its predicted performance, which with a full canopy is a little bit less than a green roof, but quite close. Finally, I'm going to talk about a much larger scale. So thinking about all the different types of green infrastructure and working towards some type of integrative planning model. And when I'm talking about ecosystem services here, I'm taking the Millennium Ecosystem Service Assessment framework. So there's a good body of literature on this, but it's mostly applied to forests or highlands. It's less often applied to small-scale ecosystems like a street tree or a city park. So it's quite a Herculean task to sort of figure out all the different services for all the different types of green infrastructure. So I'm kind of on the first steps here, but first step was hosting these expert workshops where we'd have experts in the field fill out this matrix of ecosystem services and green infrastructure types based on how much they thought it moved the dial on a certain ecosystem service. The next step was to sort of see where there was consensus and where experts disagreed. So that's, I don't expect these to be red, but the green areas show where there's less consensus, and now we're using these results to sort of have more pointed conversations around those services and those types of infrastructures. I'm going to quickly show how this matrix will eventually be incorporated into a planning model, just with some dummy weightings. But the next steps will be reducing this matrix. For example, carbon reduction by a green roof is probably not significant on the global scale, and there's quite a bit of services that are generally neutral. So we'll be able to remove those and sort of get it down to a more manageable and more robust matrix. And then we'll incorporate empirical evidence for the sort of harder services like water regulation, stuff where there are studies. And with the softer ones, the cultural, the livability, we're planning on having smaller matrices being filled out by different stakeholders, so residents, municipalities. And then we'll combine it with spatial data sets to, well, you can do a few things with it. This is showing a priority map. So combining these 6 problems in New York that green infrastructure can address, equally weighted, which again, it'll be more advanced than this, but you're able to get an idea of where it's more important, where green infrastructure should be prioritized. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Questions? Thanks, really interesting. Can you quantify the benefits of improving the percolation and avoiding the runoff from the rainfall in the first part, the small scale trees? What's the benefit of circulating the water?
In terms of
is it less damage for infrastructure, less flooding damage, more convenience, safety, infrastructure depreciation, hydrologic cycle, or which of those is the real
driver?
The benefits of this approach, and is there a way to actually assess some kind of aggregate benefits for making the interventions that you're talking about?
Yeah, so the reason the city's doing it now is because they have these non-compliance, they're non-compliant with the EPA, so they get these fines every time there's a combined sewer overflow. So the real reason it's being pushed is because we're polluting the waters, the EPA is fining us, and then this is seen as an attractive strategy. Compared to more traditional like wastewater treatment, so having plants or these digester eggs, it's coming into question now whether or not this is more economically intelligent or whatever. Like, it's seeming like we need to start to quantify the ecosystem services, the heat island reduction, those things to justify continued implementation of green infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
So the water, that's really the easier and where most of the research has been done. And it is to primarily avoid pollution.
The pollution of the wastewater backing up and overflowing into the water supply, or into where?
Oh, it goes directly into the river.
Into the rivers.
So like you said, we have one pipe for both.
To keep the water out of the stormwater system.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we have one pipe for sewage and water. And like even a quarter of an inch of rain, some of these back up. It's really common.
So the main effect is the ecological effect of the of the polluted water finding its way to the rivers.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Are we going to run through or?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there any attention to the comparative evaluation of putting green stuff on the roof or putting photovoltaic cells on the roof? Are you thinking about the trade-offs between alternative uses of roof space? And the same for if there are equivalent trade-offs for other activities. Is there a comparative framework?
Let's see. I'm not focusing on that directly. I know there are people researching both, sort of doing, getting like a synergy with both, having the plants cool the air, which make the PV perform higher. So there is work being done. There are systems that have a photovoltaic cell and then a shade-tolerant plant below. But it's not my area, as important as it is. Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you.